Feel her strength fading, thin rivulets of crimson seeping free of the wound in her abdomen. Her clothes grew sticky and sodden with the essence that had once brought her life. She could hear her body giving in, the incessant drumming in her ears weakening to an unsteady rhythm. A subtle ringing replaced the soft melody that had once comforted her child. She staggered against the wall, cackles echoing off the wooden surfaces as they seemed to draw in around her. What had once been a warm home would soon become her casket. Her gaze lifted from the floor, trailing the blood that had dried after its escape. There stood no one at the end beyond the wielder of her slayer, a man dressed head to toe in the brightest of unmarred armor, grasping at the handle of a shining sword. No, not a man, but a paragon of how the brilliance of justice can blind even the hardiest of warriors, a reminder that no one was safe from the corruption of their innermost desires. "Your life ends here, witch," the Blood Knight spat. "My life?" The witch chuckled and shook her head. "My life was one of peace. My peace was one of freedom." She raised a crooked finger in the man's direction. Blood dripped from her nail, glistening as it fell. "Your lies shan't blind me, vile woman." The knight drew closer. The witch remained steadfast. "The people spoke of your bruise, and how you lured children to your home here in the woods." The witch motioned to the nearby table, its surface littered with shattered teacups and an upturned kettle. She motioned to the toys she had so dutifully carved from the forest's branches. She raised a tearful gaze to meet the knight's. "Do they speak of my tea and the toys I craft? Do they speak of the children I've cared for and helped find homes? They didn't need to." The knight raised his blade once more. Sunlight reflected off its surface, but only the man's shadow fell upon the witch. There was no peace left to her, no freedom to live, no safety. But if she would lose these all, the least she could do would be to grant such blessings to someone else. As the knight struck her down, as the final breaths drifted from her lungs, she whispered out one final curse. "May your cruel, bloody life be cursed with peace and safety. May you never again be able to draw a single drop of blood. May you be free from your thirst." The knight stared at himself in the mirror, hair disheveled and eyes bloodshot. How many days had it been now? How long had he been forced away from the dreams he had relished every night? No more could he relive the wonderful memories of his time on the battlefield. No more could he long for the blood of his enemies. No more could he draw any blood. Incensed, the knight lashed out. His knuckles strove to crack the mirror and shatter the glass, to break the image of the ruined man before him. The curse drew the strength from his body and left him unable to act. He drew a knife from its spot at his waist. Its blade was short, yet sharp enough to have taken plenty of lives. He could practically taste the blood he had once licked off of its curved edge. His grip firm around its hilt, he pointed it to his other palm. Yet, despite the immense desire to drive it in, to coax out even the slightest hint of that crimson essence, neither he nor the blade could move. As his frustration reached its boiling point, he threw the dagger aside. It clattered across the floor, metal upon stone echoing in his ears. As the echo faded, the witch's voice took its place. It reminded him of the curse, mocked him about the life that had been stolen away from him. Then and there, he decided he would not rest, would not give in, until he had managed to break the curse. He longed for the coppery scent of his enemy's essence, hungered for their lives, thirsted for their blood. Yet the more the desire lingered in the back of his skull, the weaker it grew. He knew it wouldn't be long before he forgot the fulfillment, the fullness, the satiation of killing. And what would happen then? It had been years since the knight had last thought about taking a life. Not once had there been a stitch of desire for neither human nor beast. The adjustment had been difficult, as the curse forced him toward a life of fruits and vegetables rather than hunting, a life of helping rather than hurting, but he had endured. He carried the basket of apples home, heading along the dirt path through the village. Each step had a slight spring to it, a sign of his joy for the day's weather. For some time now, it had been clear skies and gentle rains, perfect for the fields and their crops. To all who saw him, he waved and smiled. To all he greeted, young and old and in between, he was a friend, a companion, a helper. They knew him and he knew them, and there was nothing they would not do for one another. Beyond the limits of the village sat a field, and in that field grew the pleasing sight of golden wheat. Hundreds, if not thousands, of golden stalks swayed in a gentle breeze, filling the air with the serene sound of their rustling. The only sight greater than such a field was that which sat at their center. A single home, built by his own hands, lay in wait, topped with dried grass and walled with cobbles, protected by a wooden door and left open through a single window. It was the best home he could have asked for. "Papa! Papa's back!" The voice emerged from the window, young and full of innocence and childish wonder. A moment later, its source came into view. It was a young girl, barely 7 years old, with a head of brilliant blonde hair. Her eyes shimmered as blue as the skies of above, while her skin was fair. She was the spitting image of her mother, and as he neared, the one he loved emerged from their home. "You brought the apples!" she exclaimed as she took the basket. "I may have stopped fighting, but I'm not yet frail," spoke the knight. "I know, love." The woman stood upon the tips of her toes so she might kiss him upon the cheek. "Come in, the pie only needs your apples." The knight let out a breath, pleased he could have such a peaceful, safe life. The words of the witch echoed once more in his mind, but he ignored them. After all, what sort of curse was this? The knight was asleep when he heard the first noise. It was awful, horrendous, a noise he hadn't heard in years. It was a sound that had once filled his greatest dreams, a song that had left him yearning for what followed. His eyes shot open as the drumming of his heart beat to the call of war. In the distance, the crackling of flames, the crumbling of buildings and their materials. It returned him to his earlier desires as he thought of the destruction he had once wrought with his own hands. Screams filled the night, calling for rescue. Shouts echoed from the village, men slain by whoever had dared to attack. The knight leaped out of bed. "Hurry, my love, we must escape." The woman knew all too well what such a noise could mean, though neither of them wished to believe it. It had been years since their small village had been set upon by raiders. What could they want with farmlands and stone homes? "Go," the knight urged. "Grab our daughter and flee." "But what of you?" The knight opened a chest beside their bed, within which lay his sword and shield. Though it had been years since the blade had seen the light of day, he hoped its edge could still strike true. With sword and shield in hand, with simple leather armor donned, the knight departed from his home. Ahead of him, his wife and daughter fled through the farmlands. They didn't make it far. The knight watched in horror as a horseman rode past, and in one fell swoop cut them both down. The knight screamed and charged for the enemy. His blade flashed silver in the light of the moon as he raised it. Yet, when he went to strike, he found the strength leaving his arm. He stopped before the horse. The horse reared up. The knight's gaze met the raider's. "You," the raider spoke with a smirk, "you are the knight cursed with peace and safety." "And you have taken that from me." The knight's fist clenched tighter around the handle of his sword. "You have broken the curse. There is no peace and safety left in this world for me, and there shall be none for you." The knight raised his sword again, but yet again failed to strike. The raider burst into raucous laughter, using his own sword to tip the knight's gaze upward. "The curse mentioned only you, not those you love." The raider's stare changed, from cold and hard to knowing and familiar. When next he spoke, there was a tinge of the witch's voice beneath his own. "You alone shall be safe forevermore."